Hello everyone. With today's lecture, we're going to start in on ecosystems and the biosphere. Particularly with this lecture, it's going to be talking about biomes, and that reading can be found in the textbook in chapter 20, particularly section 3 of chapter 20. Our whole Earth is considered to be one biosphere. So a biosphere is something that includes all of the organisms on a planet together with the physical environments in which they live. When we use the word biosphere, we're referring to the interconnected network of everything on the planet. Even though the focus is typically on living things, right, biosphere, by definition, it needs to include the non-living aspects of the environments because their effect on living things is vital, as are the effects of living things on non-living things. It goes both ways. Earth is a single entity with interconnected physical and biological components. Ecology, what we're starting to talk about with this lecture and the next couple of lectures, is the study of interactions between living things and between living things and their non-living environment. So ecology is the study of that interplay. It's the study of the impact living things have on each other and the effect biotic and abiotic aspects of ecosystems have on each other. The field of ecology gets at questions like what kinds of factors influence the distribution of organisms on Earth, like who lives where and why. What impact do the organisms have on one another? How does Earth sustain life? Questions like that. Ecology covers several levels of the biological hierarchy. If you recall back to the beginning of the semester when we looked at different aspects of biology as being part of a hierarchy, we started with the smallest units that were relevant to biology, the atom, and built up from there. Multiple atoms making up molecules, many macromolecules making up organelles, working together in a cell, cells making up tissues, and eventually whole organisms. The hierarchy continues from there, beyond the individual, and that's when topics start falling under the purview of ecology. So where do we go from there, from the individual? Multiple individuals, multiple organisms make up a population. So many individuals of a single species that live together are a population. And we defined population during the evolution lectures. Then multiple populations of different species make up a community. So a community is multiple populations of different species. Say, for instance, the community of organisms in the Ozarks. So around here, we have 20 different species of crawfish and 300 different species of birds and 6 different species of salamanders. A level up from community is the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is the community of organisms as well as the non-living surroundings. So an Ozark ecosystem would be all of those species that I just mentioned, as well as the places they live, the caves and underneath dead logs, and it includes the rain that falls on their heads and the temperature of the air that they're used to and like living in. It's all the living things and their abiotic surroundings. And then a biome is all of the similar ecosystems that are characterized by similar conditions. So keeping with the Ozarks as an example, Mark Twain National Forest is a single, unique ecosystem, but it can be classified as a certain kind of biome, a temperate deciduous forest. And we see multiple different temperate forests all around the world. So those are all considered to be one kind of biome, one categorization of a particular kind of ecosystem. And then the biosphere is all of the ecosystems on the Earth together. So for today, we're mostly going to be focusing at the biome level. We'll talk more about communities next lecture, but before we can fully understand those interactions between organisms, it's helpful to set the stage that they're on. So we're going to focus on biomes today. Biomes can be categorized based on unique features that they have in terms of the climate as well as ecological features. So, what kind of organisms live there? A biome is a region on the planet that's characterized by a unique set of organisms, but more importantly, they're characterized by a unique climate that dictates what those organisms are. And a biome can encompass more than one ecosystem and will typically stretch across a large portion of the Earth. Like I said, there are many forests on the planet that we could classify as temperate deciduous forest. Each one of those is its own ecosystem, but they all fall under the same biome name. Every biome has a distinctive set of life forms. And while the species themselves might be different, similar climatic conditions lead to evolutionary convergence, resulting in similar groups of organisms living in them. I've got some specific examples at the end of this lecture, but this is basically saying the plants in the deserts of California look like the plants in the deserts of Africa, even though they're not related plants, because they've evolved similar adaptations to deal with similar climates. There are terrestrial biomes, which are land biomes, and are usually named based on the kind of vegetation that grows there. And there are aquatic biomes, and those are usually classified based on the physical and chemical features of the water. So marine biomes, which are saltwater biomes, versus freshwater biomes. We're mostly going to focus on terrestrial biomes, though you could fill multiple courses just talking about marine and freshwater ecology. There's actually a great freshwater ecology course taught at MST if anyone's interested. For terrestrial biomes, the location of each biome on the planet depends on a few things. They're dictated by temperature, precipitation, and altitude. These are the kinds of things that shape where on Earth you find which kind of biome. Climate has the biggest influence on the positioning or the location of terrestrial biomes. So what biome is present where on the planet is dictated by environmental variables. The most important of these being temperature and precipitation. So rainfall, snowfall, humidity that's condensing and falling out of the atmosphere. The amount of temperature and precipitation in different biomes result in different kinds of organisms living there, but also the organisms that live there can influence the climate in turn. It's sort of a two-way street there. For instance, the shade from trees modifies the amount of sun that reaches the soil, which in turn affects the air temperature. And the transpiration of trees, which is plants pulling water up from the ground and breathing it out as water vapor, has a profound effect on rates of precipitation. So it's a complicated feedback loop between organisms and climate. Additionally, nowadays, the extent and distribution of particular kinds of biomes are really strongly influenced by human activity. It's an unfortunate truth that when we look at humans' abilities to shape the surface of the planet, we've been having just as much an impact on what organisms live where in really just a matter of centuries as all of these other climate variables have had over millions of years. And more on that next week. So here's a great graph that plots average precipitation here against average temperatures here. And when we put ranges on the graph from real data collected from different biomes, we see distinct partitioning. So just FYI, as I walk through this x-axis is flipped from what you might expect, where it's hotter temperatures here on the left and colder temperatures here on the right. But basically looking at this graph, when we go to tropical rainforest biomes and we look at the range of precipitation, typically in rainforests we get between 250 centimeters of rainfall and 450 centimeters of rainfall within a year. And rainforests, if you look at the regular temperatures, they range from 20 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius, which for Fahrenheit, that's about 70 to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then looking at some other areas on the graph, we see that deserts have a very large range of temperatures. They get incredibly hot, but they also get incredibly cold. And I'll talk about that when we get into deserts of why that is. But uniformly, deserts have very, very low precipitation. So what's cool on this graph is that each kind of biome is characterized by a particular range, and they're separated out very distinctly. There's some amount of overlap, but not typically, just based on the way that we've decided to classify these kinds of places based on the amount of rainfall and the amount of temperature that they have. So we know what biome will be in dry places versus wet places, or hot places versus cold places. But what makes a certain spot on the planet any of those things? It all depends on the sun. The sun drives virtually every aspect of climate on the planet.